Bound by the past. Lady Rosamond of Whitmore had never defied her father until she was forced to wed Sir Hugh Fitzalan, a knight with a haunted past. She expected indifference, but when his fingers brushed against hers, she heard the hesitation in his voice. "You do not want this marriage," he murmured. "Then why do you look at me as if you do?" Chapter 1. The Unwanted Betrothal. The tapestry depicting the hunt of a unicorn swayed gently in the draught that snaked through the solar of Whitmore Castle. Lady Rosamond of Whitmore stared at it, her fingers tracing the outline of the mythical beast on the worn, needlepoint cushion beneath her hands. The unicorn, a symbol of purity and grace, seemed to mock her current predicament. Purity, grace. Neither would save her from the fate her father had decreed. "He is a good man, Rosamond. A strong man, a loyal man," her father, Lord Edmund of Whitmore, had boomed earlier that day, his voice echoing off the stone walls of the great hall. He hadn't asked her opinion, of course. He never did. He'd merely informed her, as one might inform a stable hand of a new horse to be broken. "Sir Hugh Fitzalan, a knight of renown. He will protect you, provide for you. This alliance will secure Whitmore's future." Rosamond had bitten back the retort that threatened to spill forth. What future? A future spent as a broodmare for a stranger, a pawn in her father's endless game of power and land acquisition? She was 24, past the age most noble women were wed, a fact that had whispered through the castle halls like the rustling of dry leaves. Her quiet nature, her preference for books and embroidery over courtly dances and flirtation, had been deemed a flaw, a reason for her unmarried state. Now that very flaw was being used as justification for this arrangement. A tear slipped down her cheek, splashing onto the cushion. She quickly brushed it away, ashamed of her weakness. Tears were a luxury she could ill afford. Strength, that was what was required. Strength and a healthy dose of resignation. Her maid, Alara, a woman who had served Rosamond since she was a babe, entered the solar, her footsteps soft on the rush-strewn floor. Alara was more than a servant, she was a confidant, a surrogate mother, a silent witness to Rosamond's quiet sorrows. "My lady," Alara said softly, her voice laced with a concern that Rosamond both cherished and resented. "The preparations are underway. The feast will be grand." Grand. Another word that held no joy for Rosamond. A grand feast to celebrate her gilded cage. "Alara," Rosamond said, her voice barely above a whisper, Do you think there is any escape from this?" Alara approached and knelt beside her, taking Rosamond's hand in her own. Her hands were rough from years of service, but her touch was gentle. "Escape, my lady? There's duty. And there is acceptance. Sometimes, acceptance is the bravest path." Rosamond looked into Alara's eyes, searching for a flicker of hope, a hint of rebellion. But she saw only a weary understanding, a reflection of the world they lived in, a world where women were bound by duty, by the will of their fathers, their husbands, their kings. "But what of my heart, Alara?" Rosamond asked, the question a raw, vulnerable plea. "What of my own desires?" Alara sighed, a sound that spoke volumes of unfulfilled dreams and unspoken regrets. "Your heart, my lady, will learn to adapt. It will find its own solace. It must." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Rosamond stood before the large, ornate mirror in her chamber. Alara was fastening the heavy, silver clasps of her gown, a rich velvet the color of deep wine. The gown was beautiful, no doubt, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, but it felt like a shroud, a symbol of her impending confinement. "He arrives tomorrow," Alara said, her voice neutral, betraying none of her own feelings on the matter. "With his retinue. Lord Edmund wishes you to greet him in the great hall." Rosamond nodded, her reflection staring back at her, a pale, almost ghostly image in the fading light. She saw not a bride-to-be, but a sacrifice. A sacrifice to Whitmore, to her father's ambition, to the cold, hard realities of their world. As Alara finished arranging her hair, Pinning a delicate silver circlet adorned with pearls onto her dark braids, Rosamund caught a glimpse of movement outside her window. A lone raven perched on the branch of an ancient oak tree, its black eyes gleaming in the twilight. It seemed to be watching her, a silent, ominous presence. She shivered, a sudden chill running down her spine. The raven took flight, its wings beating a slow, heavy rhythm against the darkening sky. Rosamund closed her eyes, a silent prayer forming on her lips. A prayer not for happiness, but for strength. For the courage to face the unknown, to endure the life that had been chosen for her. And perhaps, just perhaps, to find a flicker of something resembling peace within the walls of her gilded cage. She would have to find some way to survive Sir Hugh Fitzalan and the life he would bring, with or without her consent. For her own survival, she had to be ready to see what tomorrow held. She looked at her reflection, at the woman who had to be strong. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Whitmore Halls. The air in the great hall of Whitmore Castle crackled with anticipation, a mixture of nervous energy and forced festivity. Servants scurried about, carrying platters laden with roasted meats, flagons of ale and wine, and sweetmeats crafted into elaborate shapes. Torches blazed in their sconces, casting flickering shadows on the tapestries that adorned the stone walls, depicting scenes of battles won and hunts concluded. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the aroma of spices and roasted boar, creating a heady, almost overwhelming atmosphere. Rosamund stood beside her father near the high table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The wine-colored gown felt even heavier than it had the previous evening, the silver clasps digging into her skin. She felt like a specimen on display, scrutinized by the assembled guests, minor lords and ladies, neighboring landowners, and the ever-present, watchful eyes of her father's retainers. Whispers rippled through the hall, like the rustling of leaves in a sudden gust of wind. "She's a quiet one, isn't she? Pity, such a beauty wasted on Fitzalan. He's a grim sort, they say, haunted by the war." Rosamund heard them all, the snippets of gossip, the veiled criticisms, the pitying glances. She kept her gaze fixed on the entrance to the hall, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She imagined Sir Hugh Fitzalan as a monstrous figure, a scarred warrior with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. The stories she'd heard painted him as a man hardened by battle, a man who had seen too much death and known too little kindness. Lord Edmund, oblivious to her inner turmoil, or perhaps simply choosing to ignore it, patted her hand with a force that bordered on painful. "Remember, Rosamund," he said, his voice low and firm, "you represent Whitmore. Be gracious, be courteous, and above all, be obedient." Obedient. The word hung in the air like a heavy chain. It was the cornerstone of her existence, the defining principle of her life. Obedience to her father, and soon, obedience to her husband. A fanfare of trumpets blasted through the hall, silencing the whispers and drawing every eye to the entrance. The heavy oak doors swung open, revealing a group of men silhouetted against the bright sunlight of the courtyard. At their head stood a figure taller than the rest, clad in gleaming armor, a surcoat emblazoned with a silver falcon on a field of azure. Sir Hugh Fitzalan. Rosamund's breath caught in her throat. He was not the monster she had imagined. He was imposing, yes, but also strikingly handsome. His hair was dark, streaked with silver at the temples, framing a face that was strong and weathered, but not cruel. His eyes, as he scanned the hall, were a deep, intense blue, and they held a sadness that resonated with something deep within her. He moved with a grace that belied the weight of his armor, his steps purposeful and measured. As he approached the high table, he removed his helmet, revealing a brow creased with lines that spoke of worry and perhaps regret. He held the helmet tucked under his arm, his gaze finally settling on Rosamund. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Their eyes met, and Rosamund felt a jolt, a strange, unsettling connection. It was not fear, not entirely. It was recognition, a shared sense of something unspoken, something that lay hidden beneath the surface of their forced encounter. Lord Edmund stepped forward, his voice booming with forced joviality.
Sir Hugh.
Welcome to Whitmore. We are honored by your presence. Sir Hugh bowed, his movements precise and respectful. Lord Edmund, the honor is mine. I thank you for your hospitality and for the generous gift of your daughter's hand. His voice was deep and resonant, with a hint of weariness that tugged at Rosamund's heart. He spoke the words expected of him, the courteous phrases of a noble alliance, but there was a subtle undercurrent of something else. Resignation? Reluctance? Then, he turned his gaze back to Rosamund, and his expression softened, almost imperceptibly. He offered her a slight bow, his eyes searching hers. Lady Rosamund, he said, his voice lower now, more intimate. I trust you're well. It was a simple question, a polite formality. But the way he said it, the hesitation in his voice, the way his eyes lingered on hers, made Rosamund's heart flutter. She managed a small nod, her voice trapped in her throat. He took a step closer, and she could smell the faint scent of leather and steel, a scent that was both foreign and strangely comforting. He did not touch her, not yet, but his proximity was almost overwhelming. Then, in a voice so low that only she could hear, he murmured, You do not want this marriage. It was a statement, not a question. And it was true. Rosamund was startled by his bluntness, by his perception. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. He met her gaze, his blue eyes unwavering. And then, he added, his voice still a whisper, Then why do you look at me as if you do? The question hung between them, unanswered, a challenge and an invitation all at once. Rosamund felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a mixture of shame and something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The whispers of the hall faded into the background, the presence of her father, and the assembled guests forgotten. There was only Sir Hugh Fitzallen, his haunted eyes, and his unexpected question, a question that stirred something within her that she had long thought dormant. The answer, she suddenly feared, would define more than the future he promised it may define her forever. Chapter 3. The Night of Haunted Eyes. The feast proceeded with a forced gaiety that grated on Rosamund's nerves. The endless courses of food, the boisterous laughter of the men, the cloying flattery of the women, it all felt like a charade, a performance staged for the benefit of two people who were, in reality, strangers bound together by a contract neither had truly chosen. Rosamund sat beside Sir Hugh at the high table, acutely aware of his presence.
He was a study in contrast.
His physical strength was undeniable, evident in the breadth of his shoulders, the powerful lines of his arms, the calloused hands that rested lightly on the table. Yet, there was a gentleness in his manner, a quiet courtesy that surprised her. He spoke sparingly, responding to her father's pronouncements with polite deference, but his eyes, those haunted blue eyes, often strayed to Rosamund, studying her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He did not attempt to engage her in frivolous conversation, for which she was grateful. The usual courtly banter would have felt unbearable under the circumstances. Instead, he observed her, silently, as if trying to decipher a hidden message, a secret language written on her face. During a lull in the conversation, as a minstrel plucked a melancholic tune on his lute, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamund, his voice low and private. Whitmore is a beautiful castle, Lady Rosamund. You must be proud of your home. It was a safe topic, a neutral observation. Yet, the way he said it, the subtle emphasis on the word home, made Rosamund's heart ache. She had always loved Whitmore, its ancient stones, its sprawling gardens, its hidden nooks and crannies. It was the only home she had ever known. And now, she was being forced to leave it, to trade it for a life with a stranger in a place she had never seen. It is, she replied, her voice soft, her gaze fixed on the intricate carvings of the table. I have many fond memories here. Memories are precious things, he said, his voice tinged with a sadness that mirrored her own. They are the anchors that keep us grounded, even when the storms of life rage around us. His words struck a chord within her. She sensed that he spoke from experience, that his own memories were perhaps not all fond, that he too carried the weight of the past. Do you have many memories, Sir Hugh? She asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. He hesitated, his gaze shifting to the flickering flames of the torches. I have memories, he said, his voice guarded. Some I cherish, others I would rather forget. Rosamond wanted to ask him about those memories, about the shadows that haunted his eyes. But she dared not. She was his bride-to-be, not his confidant. And yet, the shared sadness she sensed in him, the unspoken understanding that passed between them, created a fragile bond, a tentative connection in the midst of their forced union. Later, as the feast drew to a close, Lord Edmund, fueled by wine and self-satisfaction, rose to his feet, his voice booming across the hall. A toast, he declared, to Sir Hugh Fitzallen and my daughter, Rosamond. May their union bring prosperity and strength to both our houses. The assembled guests raised their goblets, their voices joining in a chorus of well wishes. Rosamond forced a smile, feeling like a puppet on a string, her every move dictated by her father's will. Sir Hugh also rose, his expression unreadable. He raised his goblet, his eyes meeting Rosamond's across the table. To a new beginning, he said, his voice lacking the boisterous enthusiasm of her father. A new beginning. The words held a double meaning, a promise and a threat. A new beginning for their houses, yes, but also a new beginning for Rosamond, a journey into the unknown, a life with a man who was both a stranger and, increasingly, a source of unexpected solace. As the guests began to disperse, making their way to their chambers or heading home, Lord Edmund clapped Sir Hugh on the back, his grip almost bruising. Take good care of her, Fitzallen, he said, his voice slurring slightly. She's a delicate flower. Delicate flower. Rosamond bristled at the description. She was not a delicate flower. She was a survivor. She had endured years of her father's domineering control, of the stifling expectations of her station. She would endure this marriage, too. Sir Hugh nodded, his expression respectful but firm. I will, my lord. I assure you, Lady Rosamond's well-being is of paramount importance to me. His words, spoken with a sincerity that surprised her, eased the knot of tension in her chest. He did not promise love or happiness or even affection, but he promised care. And in that moment, that was enough. The subtle fear had not gone away, but a new feeling joined it. It felt like hope. As her father led Sir Hugh away, presumably to discuss the finer points of the marriage contract, Rosamond was left alone in the now empty hall. The remnants of the feast lay scattered on the tables, the torches burned low, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She walked to the large window that overlooked the courtyard, the cold stone beneath her slippered feet. The moon was high in the sky, casting a silvery glow on the landscape. She thought of Sir Hugh, of his haunted eyes, of his unexpected kindness, of his whispered question from earlier that evening. Why do you look at me as if you do? She didn't have an answer, not yet. But as she gazed out at the moonlit night, she knew that she would find one. She had to. Her future, her survival, depended on it. The fear within her did not vanish entirely, but in its place was a small shoot of determination. Chapter 4. A bargain struck in moonlight. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, the air carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and wood smoke from the castle kitchens. Rosamond had slept little, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, apprehension, resignation, and a flicker of something akin to curiosity about the man she was to wed. She dressed simply, choosing a gown of soft blue wool, its only adornment a delicate silver chain that had belonged to her mother. She eschewed the elaborate hairstyles favored by the court ladies, opting instead to braid her dark hair and leave it unadorned. She wanted to present herself as she was, without pretense or artifice. Alara, ever watchful, noticed her somber mood. My lady, she said softly, you are pale. Are you unwell? Rosamond shook her head. I am apprehensive, Alara. That is all. Alara nodded, understanding without the need for further explanation. He seems a decent man, my lady. Stern, perhaps, but not unkind. Rosamond appreciated Alara's attempt at reassurance, but she knew that appearances could be deceiving. She had learned that lesson well, living under her father's roof. She found Sir Hugh in the castle gardens, standing near a fountain that gurgled softly, its water sparkling in the morning sunlight. He was dressed in riding attire, his surcoat replaced by a simple tunic of dark green, a leather jerkin protecting him from the morning chill. He looked less imposing than he had the previous evening, more approachable. He turned as she approached, a faint smile touching his lips. "Lady Rosamond, I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I understand. This arrangement is not ideal for either of us." His bluntness surprised her again. He did not shy away from the truth, did not pretend that this was anything other than a forced alliance. "My father, he is a man who values power and security above all else," Rosamond said, choosing her words carefully. "This marriage, it is his way of securing Whitmore's future." "And your future, Lady Rosamond?" he asked, his voice gentle. "What does it hold, beyond the walls of Whitmore?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, how much to trust him. But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity, a shared understanding, that compelled her to speak. I do not know," she admitted. "I have always lived a sheltered life. My world has been limited." "Limited," he repeated, the word hanging in the air. "And yet, you strike me as a woman of uncommon strength and intelligence." His compliment, unexpected and genuine, brought a faint blush to her cheeks. I enjoy reading," she said, almost shyly. And I have a keen interest in the natural world." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him appear younger, less burdened. "Then perhaps Fitzallen Keep will not be entirely unbearable for you. We have extensive gardens and a library that, while not as grand as Whitmore's, contains a few treasures." A flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps this would not be a complete exile, a total deprivation of the things she valued. "Sir Hugh," she said, taking a deep breath, I understand that this marriage is necessary for both our houses, but I would ask something of you." He raised an eyebrow, his expression questioning. "Ask, Lady Rosamond, and I will answer if I can." "I ask for your respect," she said, her voice firm. "I ask that you treat me not as a possession, but as a partner." "Of sorts." He considered her words, his gaze thoughtful. "Respect is earned, Lady Rosamond, not given freely. But I can promise you this, I will strive to be worthy of your respect, and I will treat you with the courtesy and consideration that you deserve." It was not a declaration of love, not even a promise of affection. But it was a start. It was a bargain struck in the moonlight, a tentative agreement between two strangers who were about to embark on a journey together, a journey into the unknown. "And I, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice gaining strength, "will strive to be a worthy wife. I will do my duty."
Duty.
The words still hung heavy in the air, but it no longer felt like a sentence of imprisonment. It felt like a challenge to make the best of a difficult situation, to find a measure of peace, perhaps even happiness, within the confines of her arranged marriage. He offered her his arm, a gesture of formal courtesy. She took it, her fingers brushing against his leather-clad forearm. It was a small gesture, a tentative touch, but it sent a shiver through her, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. As they walked together through the gardens, the sun warming their faces, Rosamond felt a shift within her. The fear had not entirely vanished, but it was tempered by a newfound resolve. She would face this challenge, as she had faced all others, with courage and determination. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would find something unexpected along the way. She would find a way to make this life work, and that included finding common ground with Sir Hugh Fitzallen. He was not the monster, and she would treat him as such. The start of the day would dictate the end, she felt. Chapter 5. The Journey to Fitzallen Keep. The journey to Fitzallen Keep was a blur of changing landscapes, of rolling hills giving way to dense forests, of narrow, winding roads leading to open, windswept plains. Rosamund rode in a covered wagon, accompanied by Alara and a small retinue of guards. Sir Hugh rode alongside, his presence a constant, reassuring reminder of his promise to protect her. They spoke little during the first few days, the awkwardness of their situation still palpable. But as the miles passed, a tentative ease began to develop between them. Rosamund found herself observing Sir Hugh, studying his interactions with his men, noticing the small acts of kindness he showed to those in his service. He was a just and fair leader, respected and even loved by his men, a stark contrast to the image of the cold, ruthless warrior she had initially conjured. One evening, as they camped near a small stream, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sir Hugh approached Rosamund as she sat by the fire, a book open in her lap. "You seem to find solace in reading, Lady Rosamund," he observed, his voice soft. She looked up, startled by his presence. "It is a way to escape," she admitted, "to travel to other worlds, to experience lives different from my own."
He nodded, understanding.
"I, too, find solace in other pursuits. The training yard, the hunt, they allow me to forget for a time." She sensed the unspoken pain behind his words, the weight of the memories he carried. "What do you hunt, Sir Hugh?" she asked, curious. He smiled, a faint, fleeting smile.
"Deer, mostly. Boire en occasion.
But sometimes I hunt peace, solitude." She understood. She, too, sought solitude, a refuge from the expectations and demands of her life. "The forest, it can be a place of healing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It offers a sense of freedom." He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "Freedom, a precious commodity, Lady Rosamund, and one that is often elusive." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of one of his men, bearing a platter of roasted meat and bread. Sir Hugh thanked the man and offered the food to Rosamund. "You must be hungry, Lady Rosamund," he said. "The journey has been long." She accepted the food gratefully, surprised by his thoughtfulness. They ate in silence, the crackling fire and the chirping of crickets their only company. As they neared Fitzallen Keep, the landscape became more rugged, the hills steeper, the forests denser. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Rosamund felt a growing sense of apprehension, mixed with a strange excitement. This was her new home, her new life, and she was determined to face it with courage. On the final day of their journey, as they crested a hill, Sir Hugh pointed to a distant valley, shrouded in mist. "There," he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "Fitzallen Keep." Rosamund's breath caught in her throat. The castle was not as grand as Whitmore, not as imposing, but it had a rugged beauty, a strength that resonated with her. It was built of gray stone, its walls thick and imposing, its towers reaching towards the sky like the gnarled branches of an ancient tree. It looked formidable, yet also welcoming. As they approached the castle gates, a group of people emerged, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They were the inhabitants of Fitzallen Keep, the people who would now be her people. Sir Hugh dismounted and offered Rosamund his hand, helping her down from the wagon. His touch was gentle, reassuring. "Welcome to Fitzallen Keep, Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice soft, his eyes searching hers. "I hope you will find it a home." She looked at him, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. She had made a bargain, struck a deal. Now, she had to live up to it. And as she looked at the castle, at the people who were now her responsibility, she knew that she would. She would make this her home. She would find a way to belong, to find a purpose, to find peace. She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. I am ready, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice steady. "I am ready to begin." And as she stepped through the gates of Fitzallen Keep, she knew that her life had changed forever. The past was behind her. The future was uncertain. But in that moment, she felt a sense of possibility. A sense that, perhaps, she could build a new life, a life of her own making, within the walls of this ancient castle. And the fear gave way to resolution. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Past. Fitzallen Keep was a world unto itself, a microcosm of medieval life with its own rhythms, routines, and secrets. Rosamund spent her first few days exploring the castle, familiarizing herself with its labyrinthine corridors, its echoing chambers, and its hidden courtyards. It was a place of stark beauty, of rough-hewn stone and heavy timbers, of flickering torchlight and deep shadows. It was a far cry from the opulent elegance of Whitmore, but it possessed a rugged charm, a sense of history that resonated with her. The inhabitants of the keep were a diverse group, ranging from seasoned knights and loyal retainers to shy serving girls and weathered farmers. They regarded Rosamund with a mixture of curiosity and reserve, unsure of what to make of their new lady. She, in turn, treated them with courtesy and respect, striving to earn their trust and acceptance. Alara, ever her faithful companion, helped her navigate the intricacies of the household, introducing her to the key figures: the steward, the cook, the master of the horse, the chaplain. Each had their own role, their own responsibilities, their own place in the intricate hierarchy of the castle. Sir Hugh remained a somewhat enigmatic figure. He was often absent, attending to the affairs of his estate, overseeing the training of his men, or meeting with neighboring lords. When he was present, he was courteous and considerate, but there was a distance in his manner, a wall that Rosamund could not quite penetrate. She sensed that he was still haunted by his past, by the memories that shadowed his eyes. One evening, as she sat in the small solar that had been assigned to her, embroidering a piece of linen, she heard a knock on the door. It was Sir Hugh. "Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice hesitant. "May I intrude?" She looked up, surprised by his unexpected visit. "Of course, Sir Hugh. Please come in." He entered the room, his presence filling the small space. He looked weary, his shoulders slumped, his eyes clouded with a sadness she had come to recognize. I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice low, "for my absence. I know this transition has been difficult for you." She put down her embroidery, her hands clasped in her lap. "It has been an adjustment," she admitted. "But I am adapting." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the fire. "Fitzallen Keep is different from Whitmore. It is less refined, perhaps. It has its own beauty," she said, her voice sincere. A strength that I admire." He looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "You are perceptive, Lady Rosamund. You see beneath the surface." She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, warmed by his compliment. "I try to understand," she said. "To see things as they are, not as they appear to be." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "There are things you should know, Lady Rosamund."
About my past.
"About the shadows that haunt me." She sensed that he was about to reveal something important, something that weighed heavily on his heart. She nodded, encouraging him to continue. I was married before," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Alara. The coincidence startled her, to hear that name connected with such open sadness.
She died.
"In childbirth. Along with our child." Rosamund's heart ached for him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the raw grief that still lingered, even after years had passed. I am so sorry, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice filled with compassion. He shook his head, as if trying to shake off the memory. "It was a long time ago."
"But it changed me.
"It hardened me." "It is understandable," she said softly. "Loss, it leaves its mark on us all." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a gratitude that surprised her.
You do not judge me," he said.
"Why should I judge you?"
she asked.
"We all carry our burdens, Sir Hugh. Our scars. It is what makes us human." He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, as if he wanted to touch her, to offer comfort, but then he drew back, his fingers clenching into a fist. I do not want to burden you with my grief," he said. "It is not a burden," she replied, her voice firm. "It is a part of who you are. And I want to understand you, Sir Hugh. All of you." Her words, spoken with a sincerity that surprised even herself, hung in the air between them. A fragile connection, a tentative understanding had been forged. The shadows of the past still lingered, but a glimmer of light had begun to penetrate the darkness. She knew the secret now, the grief he harbored. And knowing made all the difference. Chapter 7. The Cold Welcome. The initial weeks at Fitzallen Keep were a trial by ice for Rosamond. While Sir Hugh, in his own reserved way, attempted to make her feel welcome, the same could not be said for all the inhabitants of the castle. There was a palpable chill in the air, a resistance to her presence that went beyond mere unfamiliarity. It emanated most strongly from a woman named Lady Isolde, a cousin of Sir Hugh's late wife, Ilara. Isolde was a woman of striking beauty, with raven hair, piercing green eyes, and a sharp, angular face that seemed perpetually set in a look of disdain. She held a position of considerable influence within the household, having managed Fitzallen Keep during the years of Sir Hugh's absence at war and after Ilara's death. She made no secret of her disapproval of Rosamond, her every glance a silent accusation, her every word laced with a subtle venom. "The Lady Rosamond seems delicate," Isolde would say, her voice dripping with sarcasm, within earshot of the servants. "Unaccustomed to the rigors of life at Fitzallen." Or, "It is a pity Sir Hugh could not find a bride more suited to his station. Someone stronger. Someone more like Ilara." These veiled insults, delivered with a chilling politeness, cut Rosamond to the quick. She tried to ignore them, to focus on her duties, on learning the ways of the keep, on building relationships with the other inhabitants. But Isolde's constant undermining, her subtle sabotage, made it difficult. Rosamond found solace in the castle gardens, a wild, untamed space that reminded her of the freedom she had left behind at Whitmore. She would spend hours there, tending to the herbs and flowers, finding a measure of peace in the quiet solitude. One afternoon, as she was weeding a bed of lavender, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up, expecting to see Ilara, but instead, it was Sir Hugh. He stood there, his expression thoughtful, his eyes fixed on her. "You seem to find sanctuary here," he observed. She nodded, her cheeks flushed from the sun and from his unexpected presence. "It reminds me of home," she admitted, "of a time when things were simpler." He understood. He, too, sought refuge in the natural world, in the solitude of the forest, in the rhythm of the hunt. "Isolde, she is difficult," he said, his voice hesitant. She loved Ilara deeply, and she is protective of my well-being." Rosamond sighed.
"I understand that," she said.
"But she makes it difficult for me, Sir Hugh. She does not accept me." He looked troubled, his brow furrowed with concern. "I will speak to her," he said. "I will make it clear that you are my wife, that you are to be treated with respect." His words, spoken with a quiet determination, warmed her heart. He was defending her, standing up for her, even against someone he clearly cared for. "Thank you, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice sincere. It means a great deal to me." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through her. "You are not alone here, Rosamond," he said. I am here." His words, simple yet profound, resonated with her. She was not alone. She had him. And even though their marriage was a forced alliance, a bargain struck in moonlight, there was a growing sense of connection between them, a shared understanding that transcended their circumstances. That evening, Rosamond witnessed a confrontation between Sir Hugh and Lady Isolde in the great hall. She did not overhear the entire conversation, but she saw the anger in Sir Hugh's eyes, the defiance in Isolde's stance, the tension that crackled in the air between them. After Isolde had stormed away, her face flushed with anger, Sir Hugh turned to Rosamond, his expression weary. "I have spoken to her," he said. She will not trouble you again." Rosamond doubted that Isolde's animosity would simply disappear, but she appreciated Sir Hugh's efforts. He had kept his promise. He had defended her. And that in itself was a victory. The cold welcome would not be easy to overcome, but with a defender on her side, she knew it would not defeat her. Chapter 8. Echoes of a Lost Love. Despite Sir Hugh's intervention, Lady Isolde's resentment towards Rosamond did not vanish, it merely went underground, transforming into a subtle, simmering hostility that manifested in veiled glances, whispered criticisms, and a persistent atmosphere of disapproval that permeated the castle. Rosamund found herself constantly on edge, aware of Isolde's watchful eyes, feeling like an intruder in her own home. One day, while exploring the castle library, a room Sir Hugh had mentioned with a flicker of pride, Rosamund stumbled upon a hidden alcove, concealed behind a tapestry depicting a falcon in flight, the Fitzalan crest. Within the alcove, she found a small, wooden chest, intricately carved with scenes of flowers and birds. Curiosity overcoming her, she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were mementos of Sir Hugh's first wife, Alara, a lock of golden hair, a delicate silver locket containing a miniature portrait of a beautiful woman with laughing eyes, a collection of dried flowers pressed between the pages of a small book of poetry, and a stack of letters, tied together with a faded ribbon. Rosamund felt a pang of guilt, a sense of intrusion, as she examined these intimate objects, these echoes of a lost love. She could see, from the portrait and the letters, that Alara had been a vibrant, passionate woman, deeply loved by Sir Hugh. She could understand Isolde's devotion to her cousin, her resentment towards the woman who had, in her eyes, taken Alara's place. As she carefully replaced the items in the chest, she heard a sound behind her. She turned, her heart pounding, to see Sir Hugh standing in the doorway of the alcove, his expression a mixture of shock and pain. He did not speak for a moment, his gaze fixed on the chest, on the memories it contained. Rosamund felt a wave of shame wash over her. She had stumbled upon something private, something sacred, something that was not meant for her eyes. I am sorry, Sir Hugh, she stammered, her voice trembling. I did not mean to intrude. I was exploring the library, and I found this alcove. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to compose himself. It is all right, Lady Rosamund, he said, his voice strained. You did not know. He stepped into the alcove, his presence filling the small space. He knelt beside the chest, his fingers tracing the carvings on its lid. These were Alara's things, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I could not bear to dispose of them. Rosamund knelt beside him, her heart aching for his loss, for the grief that still haunted him. She was very beautiful, she said softly, her gaze fixed on the miniature portrait. He nodded, his eyes clouded with sadness. She was the light of my life, he said, and when she died, a part of me died with her. Rosamund reached out, her hand hovering over his, hesitantly. Then, she gently placed her hand on his, offering a silent gesture of comfort, of understanding. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a gratitude that surprised her. Thank you, Rosamund, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For not judging me. For understanding. There is nothing to judge, Sir Hugh, she replied, her voice firm. Loss, it is a part of life. And love, it leaves its mark on us all. Even when it is gone. Her words, spoken from the heart, seemed to ease his pain, to offer a glimmer of solace in the darkness of his grief. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of their shared humanity, of their shared understanding of loss and love. The echoes did not vanish that day, but they were joined by a shared silence, a respectful understanding. He closed the chest, carefully concealing the mementos of his lost love. But the memory of that moment, of their shared vulnerability, of their unspoken connection, would remain, a fragile bond forged in the shadows of the past. A bond, Rosamund suddenly realized, that went deeper now. She finally felt as if she had been allowed to peek at the real Sir Hugh. Chapter 9. The Tournament of Oaths. News arrived at Fitzalan Keep of a grand tournament to be held at the neighboring castle of Lord Ashton, a powerful and influential nobleman. Tournaments were a common occurrence in the medieval world, a chance for knights to display their prowess, to win honor and glory, and to strengthen alliances between noble houses. Sir Hugh, despite his personal reservations, felt obligated to attend, both to represent Fitzalan and to maintain good relations with Lord Ashton. Rosamund, initially apprehensive about the prospect of such a public spectacle, found herself increasingly intrigued by the preparations. The castle buzzed with activity, armorers polishing steel, squires tending to war horses, cooks preparing lavish feasts, and seamstresses stitching banners and favors. She observed it all with a keen interest, fascinated by the rituals and traditions of this unfamiliar world. Sir Hugh, noticing her curiosity, took the time to explain the intricacies of the tournament, the different events, the joust, the melee, the archery competition, the rules of chivalry, and the significance of the oaths that the knights would swear. "It is more than just a display of skill, Rosamond," he said. "It is a test of character. A knight's honor is his most prized possession. He must be brave, courteous, loyal, and true to his word." Rosamond was particularly struck by the concept of chivalry, of the ideals of honor and virtue that were supposed to govern the behavior of knights. She had always been drawn to stories of noble heroes, of brave deeds and selfless sacrifices. But she had also seen, in her own life, how easily those ideals could be corrupted, how often power and ambition trumped honor and compassion. She voiced her doubts to Sir Hugh one evening, as they sat by the fire in her solar. "Do you believe that all knights live up to those ideals, Sir Hugh?" she asked. "Or is it merely a facade?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. "Not all," he admitted. "There are those who fall short, who betray their oaths, who use their power for selfish gain." She sensed a personal pain in his words, a hint of disillusionment. Have you known such men, Sir Hugh?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes clouded with a sadness she had come to recognize. "I have," he said, "and I have suffered because of their treachery." He did not elaborate, but Rosamond sensed that he was referring to something more than just the general corruption of the world. She suspected that his past held a specific betrayal, a wound that had not yet healed. As the day of the tournament approached, Rosamond found herself caught up in the excitement. She chose a gown of deep green velvet, embroidered with silver thread, and a matching cloak lined with fur. She wanted to look her best, to represent Fitzalan with dignity and grace. She selected her best jewels, and she asked Alara to weave flowers into her hair. On the morning of their departure, Sir Hugh presented Rosamond with a small, silk favor, embroidered with the Fitzalan falcon. "A token, Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice soft. To bring me luck, and to remind me of what I am fighting for." She accepted the favor, her heart fluttering at his gesture. It was a small thing, a simple token, but it spoke volumes. It was a sign of his trust, of his respect, of his growing affection. It meant more than any jewel. As they rode towards Lord Ashton's castle, Rosamond felt a surge of pride, a sense of belonging. She was no longer just a pawn in her father's game, a stranger in a foreign land. She was Lady Rosamond of Fitzalan, the wife of a respected knight, a woman with a role to play, a purpose to fulfill. The fear was there, but it rode side by side with determination. The tournament would show her more than games, she was determined to learn. Chapter 10. A Glimmer of Trust. The tournament at Lord Ashton's castle was a dazzling spectacle of color, sound, and pageantry. Knights in gleaming armor, their horses adorned with elaborate trappings, paraded before the assembled crowd. Banners bearing the crests of noble houses fluttered in the breeze. Minstrels played lively tunes, and vendors hawked their wares: food, drink, trinkets, and charms. Rosamond, seated in the stands beside Sir Hugh, was overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the event. She had never seen anything like it before. The energy of the crowd, the anticipation of the competition, the raw display of power and skill, it was both exhilarating and intimidating. Sir Hugh, despite his initial reluctance to participate, proved to be a formidable competitor. He excelled in the joust, unseating several opponents with his strength and precision. He fought bravely in the melee, his sword flashing in the sunlight, his movements graceful and deadly. He even impressed the crowd with his accuracy in the archery competition. Rosamond watched him with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She admired his skill, his courage, his unwavering commitment to the ideals of chivalry. But she also feared for his safety. The tournament was a dangerous game, and injuries were common. During a break in the events, Sir Hugh approached Rosamond, his face flushed with exertion, his armor dusty and dented. "Are you enjoying yourself, Lady Rosamond?" he asked, his voice slightly breathless. She smiled, her eyes shining with admiration. "You are magnificent, Sir Hugh," she said.
Truly.
He looked surprised by her praise, a faint blush rising to his cheeks.
"It is my duty," he said, modestly,
to represent Fitzallen with honor. "But it is more than duty, Sir Hugh," she said, her voice sincere. "It is skill, and courage, and a commitment to what is right." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching hers. He seemed to be on the verge of saying something more, something personal, but then he hesitated, his gaze shifting away. "I must return to the field," he said. "The final joust is about to begin." Rosamond watched him go, her heart filled with a complex mix of emotions. She was proud of him, yes, but she was also worried. And something more. Something that felt dangerously close to affection. The final joust was against Sir Reginald of Blackwood, a renowned knight known for his ruthlessness and his skill. He was a formidable opponent, and Rosamond held her breath as the two men faced each other across the field, their lances lowered, their horses pawing the ground. The signal was given, and the two knights charged, the thunder of their hooves echoing through the stands. The impact of their lances was deafening, a splintering crash that sent a shiver through Rosamond. Both men remained in their saddles, but Sir Reginald's lance had struck Sir Hugh's shield with tremendous force. They circled, preparing for another pass. Rosamond could see the determination in Sir Hugh's eyes, the grim set of his jaw. He was not just fighting for honor, he was fighting for something more for her, perhaps? The second charge was even more brutal. This time, Sir Hugh's lance struck true, hitting Sir Reginald squarely in the chest, unseating him with a resounding thud. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a deafening roar. Sir Hugh had won. He had defeated a formidable opponent, proving his skill and his courage. But as he rode towards the stands, his face was not triumphant, but concerned. He dismounted and approached Rosamond, his eyes searching hers. "Are you all right, Lady Rosamond?" he asked, his voice filled with a tenderness that surprised her. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I was worried for you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through her. "I am unharmed," he said, "thanks to your favor, and to your belief in me." His words, spoken with a sincerity that touched her deeply, brought tears to her eyes. She realized, in that moment, that something had shifted between them. The barriers of formality, of duty, of the past, were beginning to crumble. A glimmer of trust, of affection, of something more, had begun to shine through. And it was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. She felt for the first time, truly seen. Chapter 11. The Serpent in the Garden. The victory at the tournament brought a brief respite from the undercurrents of tension at Fitzallen Keep. Sir Hugh, buoyed by his success and by the growing warmth between him and Rosamond, seemed more relaxed, more open. Even Lady Isolde, while still maintaining a cool distance, seemed to have softened her overt hostility, perhaps realizing that her attempts to undermine Rosamond were proving futile. Rosamond, encouraged by this shift in atmosphere, began to take a more active role in the running of the household. She consulted with the steward, oversaw the kitchens, and even ventured into the village beyond the castle walls, interacting with the tenants and addressing their concerns. She discovered a talent for organization, a knack for diplomacy, and a genuine empathy for the people under her care. One afternoon, as she was walking in the gardens, enjoying the warmth of the late summer sun, she encountered Lady Isolde. Isolde was tending to a rose bush, her movements sharp and precise, her expression unreadable. Rosamond hesitated, unsure whether to approach her, but then she decided to take a chance. "The roses are beautiful, Lady Isolde," she said, her voice soft. Isolde looked up, her green eyes narrowed. "They were Alara's favorites," she said, her voice clipped. Rosamond nodded, understanding the unspoken accusation. I know, she said. Sir Hugh, he told me. Isolde's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. He still grieves for her, she said, more to herself than to Rosamond. I know, Rosamond repeated. And I do not seek to replace her, Lady Isolde. I only wish to be a good wife to Sir Hugh, and a good lady to Fitzallen. Isolde looked at her, her gaze searching, assessing. You are different from what I expected, she admitted, grudgingly. You are not weak.
Rosamund smiled, à fin, tentative smile.
Strength it takes many forms, Lady Isolde, she said. Sometimes it is found in quiet resilience, in perseverance. Isolde did not reply, but she did not turn away. She continued to tend to the roses, her movements less harsh, less defensive. As Rosamund continued her walk, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to bridge the gap between herself and Isolde, to build a relationship based on mutual respect, if not friendship. But her optimism was short-lived. That evening, as she was preparing for supper, Alara rushed into her chamber, her face pale with alarm. My lady, she said, her voice trembling, there is trouble. Sir Hugh, he has been accused. Rosamund's heart sank. Accused? Of what? Treachery, my lady, Alara whispered. Lord Ashton, he claims that Sir Hugh cheated at the tournament, that he used unfair means to win. Rosamund was stunned. She could not believe it. Sir Hugh, a man of honor, a knight who lived by the code of chivalry, accused of treachery? It was unthinkable. It is a lie, Alara, she said, her voice firm. A malicious lie. Sir Hugh would never do such a thing. I know, my lady, Alara said. But Lord Ashton, he is a powerful man. And he has witnesses. Rosamund felt a cold dread creep into her heart. This was not just a personal attack on Sir Hugh, it was a threat to Fitzallen, to their entire household. It was a serpent in the garden, a venomous plot designed to destroy everything they had built. She knew, in that moment, that she had to act. She had to defend Sir Hugh, to protect their home, to fight for the truth. She was no longer just a timid bride, a stranger in a foreign land. She was Lady Rosamund of Fitzallen, and she would not stand idly by while her husband was unjustly accused. The stakes were higher than ever before. She was lady of the castle, and her actions were all that stood between her new home and its destruction. Chapter 12. A Dance of Deception. The accusation of treachery cast a dark shadow over Fitzallen Keep. The atmosphere, once filled with a tentative hope, was now thick with suspicion and fear. Sir Hugh, while maintaining a stoic facade, was clearly deeply wounded by the accusation, by the betrayal of a man he had considered a friend, an ally. Rosamund, determined to clear her husband's name, threw herself into the investigation. She questioned the servants, the knights, anyone who had been present at the tournament, searching for any evidence that could refute Lord Ashton's claim. She discovered that the witnesses were all men loyal to Ashton, their testimony likely fabricated, their motive suspect. She also learned that Lord Ashton had a long-standing rivalry with Sir Hugh, a resentment that stemmed from a previous dispute over land and resources. It became increasingly clear that the accusation was not about honor or fairness, but about power and revenge. Rosamund sought counsel from the castle chaplain, Father Michael, a wise and learned man who had served Fitzallen for many years. He listened to her concerns, offering guidance and support. This is a dangerous game, my lady, he warned. Lord Ashton is a powerful and unscrupulous man. He will not hesitate to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. I know, Father, Rosamund replied, but I cannot stand idly by while Sir Hugh is unjustly accused. I must do something. Father Michael nodded, his expression grave. You are a brave woman, Lady Rosamund.
And a resourceful one.
But be careful. The path of truth, it is often fraught with peril. Rosamund, heeding Father Michael's warning, decided to employ a strategy of subtle investigation, of gathering information without revealing her true intentions. She knew that she could not confront Lord Ashton directly, Not yet. She needed irrefutable proof, something that would expose his lies and vindicate Sir Hugh. She began to cultivate a relationship with Lady Eleanor, Lord Ashton's wife, a woman known for her gentle nature and her love of art and music. Rosamond, using her own knowledge of these subjects, found common ground with Lady Eleanor, engaging her in conversations, subtly probing for information about her husband's affairs. It was a delicate dance of deception, a game of whispers and veiled hints. Rosamond had to be careful to avoid arousing suspicion, to maintain a facade of polite friendship while secretly seeking the truth. One evening, during a visit to Lord Ashton's castle, Rosamond managed to overhear a conversation between Lord Ashton and one of his advisors, a man named Sir Giles. They were discussing the tournament, and Rosamond heard Lord Ashton say, "Sir Reginald, he was well compensated for his cooperation." Rosamond's heart pounded. This was it. This was the proof she needed. Sir Reginald, the knight Sir Hugh had defeated in the final joust, had been bribed to lose, to make it appear as though Sir Hugh had cheated. She returned to Fitzallen Keep, her mind racing. She had the evidence, but she needed a way to present it, to expose Lord Ashton's treachery without endangering herself or Sir Hugh. It was a dangerous risk, but she was prepared to take it. The truth, she realized, was worth more than any danger. Chapter 13. The Price of Loyalty. Armed with the knowledge of Lord Ashton's treachery, Rosamond knew she had to act swiftly and decisively. She couldn't simply accuse him publicly, she needed concrete proof, something that would withstand scrutiny and sway the opinions of the other lords and ladies. She decided to seek the help of Sir Reginald, the knight who had been bribed to lose the joust. It was a risky move. Sir Reginald was known for his ambition and his lack of scruples. He could easily betray her to Lord Ashton, further complicating the situation. But Rosamond felt she had no other choice. She needed his testimony to clear Sir Hugh's name. She arranged a secret meeting with Sir Reginald, using Alara as an intermediary. The meeting took place in a secluded chapel, far from the prying eyes of Lord Ashton's spies. Rosamond, accompanied by Sir Hugh, who insisted on being present despite the danger, waited nervously in the candlelit silence. Sir Reginald arrived, his face hidden in the shadows of his hood. He was a large man, imposing and intimidating, even in the dim light. "Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice gruff, "you have requested my presence."
Why?
Rosamond took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. "I know about the bribe, Sir Reginald," she said, her voice firm. "I know that Lord Ashton paid you to lose the joust." Sir Reginald stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of his sword. "You have no proof," he growled.
Ido, Rosamond countered.
"I overheard Lord Ashton discussing it with Sir Giles. He admitted it." Sir Reginald hesitated, his eyes darting between Rosamond and Sir Hugh. He was clearly weighing his options, calculating the risks. What do you want?" he asked, his voice guarded. "I want the truth, Sir Reginald," Rosamond said. "I want you to testify before the King's Council, to expose Lord Ashton's treachery." Sir Reginald laughed, a harsh, cynical sound. "And what is in it for me?" he asked. "Why should I betray Lord Ashton? He is a powerful man. He can reward me handsomely." Rosamond knew that she could not offer Sir Reginald more gold than Lord Ashton. She had to appeal to something else, something deeper, his sense of honor, perhaps, if he had any left. "You swore an oath, Sir Reginald," she said, her voice rising with passion. "An oath to uphold the code of chivalry, to be brave, courteous, loyal, and true to your word. Lord Ashton, he has made you break that oath. He has corrupted you. He has stained your honor." Sir Reginald flinched, as if her words had struck a nerve. He looked at Sir Hugh, his expression unreadable. What do you offer in return?" he asked, his voice softer now, less defiant. "I offer you a chance to redeem yourself, Sir Reginald," Rosamond said. "A chance to reclaim your honor, to stand for what is right." Sir Hugh stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Sir Reginald. I offer you my forgiveness, he said, his voice filled with a quiet dignity. And my protection. I will stand by you. I will defend you against Lord Ashton's wrath. Sir Reginald was silent for a long moment, the weight of his decision heavy upon him. The price of loyalty was high, but the cost of betrayal was even higher. He looked from Rosamond to Sir Hugh, seeing not accusation, but a plea for justice. Finally, he nodded, his expression resolute. I will testify, he said. I will tell the truth. Rosamond felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had secured Sir Reginald's testimony, the key to exposing Lord Ashton's treachery. But she knew that the battle was far from over. Lord Ashton would not give up easily. He would fight back, with all his power and influence. The truth had been obtained, but revealing it to the world would be another matter. Chapter 14. Flight into the Storm. Sir Reginald's agreement to testify was a turning point, but it also marked a dangerous escalation in the conflict. Rosamond and Sir Hugh knew that Lord Ashton would not hesitate to retaliate once he learned of Sir Reginald's betrayal. They had to act quickly, to get Sir Reginald to safety, and to present their evidence to the King's Council before Ashton could silence them. They decided to leave Fitzalan keep under the cover of darkness, taking only a small, trusted escort. Alara, insistent on accompanying Rosamond, packed a few essential belongings, her face pale but determined. Father Michael, offering a prayer for their safety, gave Rosamond a small, silver crucifix, a symbol of hope and protection. As they prepared to depart, a fierce storm broke, the wind howling like a banshee, the rain lashing against the castle walls. It was as if the very elements were conspiring against them. This is madness, Rosamond, Sir Hugh said, his voice strained. We should wait until the storm passes. We cannot wait, Sir Hugh, Rosamond replied, her voice firm. Lord Ashton, he will not wait. He will strike as soon as he learns of Sir Reginald's defection. He knew she was right. Delay would be fatal. They had to take their chances, to brave the storm, to reach the king's court before it was too late. They rode through the night, the wind and rain buffeting them, the darkness obscuring their path. The horses struggled against the elements, their hooves slipping on the muddy roads. Rosamond, despite her fear, rode with a determination that surprised even herself. She was fighting for her husband, for her home, for her future. As they neared a dense forest, a group of riders emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden by helmets, their swords drawn. It was an ambush. Lord Ashton's men. Ride, Rosamond, Sir Hugh shouted, drawing his sword. Ride, and do not look back. He charged towards the attackers, his men following close behind. A fierce battle ensued, the clash of steel echoing through the stormy night. Rosamond, torn between her desire to stay and fight and her duty to escape, spurred her horse forward, Alara riding close beside her. They rode blindly through the forest, the sounds of the battle fading behind them. Rosamond prayed for Sir Hugh's safety, for the safety of his men, for their own survival. She had to reach the king. She had to expose Lord Ashton's treachery. She had to clear Sir Hugh's name. After what seemed like an eternity, they emerged from the forest, the storm beginning to subside. They found themselves on a narrow road, leading towards a small village. They were exhausted, soaked to the bone, and terrified, but they were alive. As they rode into the village, seeking shelter and assistance, Rosamond saw a familiar figure standing in the doorway of the inn. Father Michael. He had ridden ahead, anticipating their needs, preparing a safe haven for them. Thank God, you are safe, my lady, he said, his voice filled with relief. I have secured rooms for you, and I have sent word to the king's court. Help is on its way. Rosamond, overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief, collapsed into Father Michael's arms, tears streaming down her face. She had survived the storm. She had escaped the ambush. She had reached safety. But the battle was far from over. She had to keep fighting, for Sir Hugh, for Fitzalan, for justice. The flight had been harrowing, but she found herself bolstered by what had to be done. Chapter 15. Sanctuary found. The village inn, though humble, offered a welcome respite from the dangers they had faced. Rosamund and Alara were given a small but clean room, with a warm fire and dry clothes. Father Michael, ever resourceful, had managed to procure food and drink, and he tended to their needs with a quiet efficiency that soothed Rosamund's frayed nerves. While they waited for the king's envoy, Rosamund spent her time worrying about Sir Hugh. She had no way of knowing if he had survived the ambush, if he was injured, or worse, captured by Lord Ashton. The uncertainty gnawed at her, fueling her anxiety and her determination to see justice done. Father Michael, sensing her distress, offered words of comfort and reassurance. "Sir Hugh is a brave and skilled warrior, my lady," he said. "He will fight to survive. And God willing, he will rejoin us soon." Rosamund clung to that hope, to the belief that Sir Hugh was still alive, that he would return to her. She prayed fervently, clutching the silver crucifix Father Michael had given her, finding solace in her faith. On the third day of their wait, a company of royal guards arrived, their banners bearing the king's crest. They were led by Sir Gareth, a knight known for his integrity and his loyalty to the crown. Rosamund, relieved to see a friendly face, greeted him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Lady Rosamund," Sir Gareth said, bowing respectfully. "His Majesty, he has received your message. He is deeply concerned by the accusations against Sir Hugh. He has ordered me to escort you to the royal court, and to bring Sir Reginald under his protection." Rosamund explained the situation, recounting the events of the past few weeks, the evidence she had gathered, and Sir Reginald's willingness to testify. Sir Gareth listened attentively, his expression grave. "This is a serious matter, Lady Rosamund," he said. "Lord Ashton, he is a powerful man, but His Majesty, he is a just king. He will see that the truth is revealed." With Sir Gareth and his men providing a secure escort, Rosamund, Alara, Father Michael, and Sir Reginald set out for the royal court. The journey was long and arduous, but Rosamund felt a renewed sense of hope. She was closer than ever to clearing Sir Hugh's name, to exposing Lord Ashton's treachery, to securing justice for herself and her husband. As they approached the royal castle, a magnificent structure of soaring towers and gleaming walls, Rosamund saw a figure riding towards them, his armor battered and his face weary, but his eyes shining with a familiar light. It was Sir Hugh. Rosamund's heart leaped with joy. She spurred her horse forward, her tears blinding her, her voice choked with emotion. "Hugh!" she cried, her voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. He rode to meet her, his arms reaching out to embrace her. They clung to each other, their reunion a testament to their love, their resilience, their unwavering commitment to each other. You are alive," Rosamund whispered, her voice trembling. "I am," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Thanks to you, Rosamund. Your courage saved me. Your belief in me gave me strength." Their reunion was brief, but profound. They had faced danger, betrayal, and uncertainty, but their love had endured. And now, together, they would face the final challenge, the confrontation with Lord Ashton, the battle for justice. Sanctuary had strengthened her, and seeing her husband again emboldened her beyond measure. Chapter 16. The Heart's Awakening. The reunion with Sir Hugh filled Rosamund with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of her own feelings. The fear and uncertainty of the past few weeks had stripped away the layers of formality and duty that had defined their relationship, revealing a core of affection, respect, and a growing love that she could no longer deny. She realized that she had fallen in love with her husband, not the knight of haunted eyes she had initially met, but the man of courage, integrity, and quiet strength she had come to know. She loved his gentle smile, his thoughtful gaze, his unwavering commitment to what was right. She loved the way he treated her, not as a possession, but as an equal, a partner, a woman he respected and valued. She confessed her feelings to him one evening, as they sat together in the chambers that had been assigned to them at the royal court. They were awaiting the king's summons, the final confrontation with Lord Ashton, and the tension was palpable. "Hugh," she said, her voice trembling slightly, I needed to tell you something. Something that I have only recently realized. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with concern. What is it, Rosamond? Are you unwell? She shook her head, her gaze fixed on his. I love you, Hugh, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I have fallen in love with you. He was silent for a moment, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else. Something that looked like hope. Then he reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Rosamond, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I love you too. I have loved you for a long time.
But I dared not speak.
I thought you could never love a man like me. A man haunted by his past. She leaned into his touch, her tears flowing freely now, tears of joy, of relief, of a love finally acknowledged, finally shared. Your past does not define you, Hugh, she said.
It is a part of you, yes.
But it is not all of you. I love the man you are now. The man you have always been beneath the shadows. He pulled her close, embracing her tightly, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both passionate and tender, a seal on their unspoken vows, a promise of a future together, a future free from the constraints of duty and the shadows of the past. The kiss was a symbol, a culmination of all that had brought them to the edge of ruin, but instead resulted in love. I feared I would lose you, he whispered against her hair, his voice thick with emotion. When I saw those riders, when I thought you were in danger, and I feared for you, she replied, her voice muffled against his chest. I thought I would never see you again. They held each other, finding solace in their shared love, in their newfound connection, in the promise of a future together. The challenges that lay ahead, the confrontation with Lord Ashton, the uncertainty of the king's judgment, seemed less daunting now, less overwhelming. They would face them together, united by their love, strengthened by their bond. It was an awakening, a rebirth of their love. Chapter 17.
Skottslade bara.
The summons to the king's court arrived the following morning. Rosamond and Sir Hugh, dressed in their finest attire, walked hand in hand to the great hall, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The hall was filled with nobles, knights, and courtiers, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. Lord Ashton, standing near the king's throne, looked smug and confident, his eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation. King Edward, a wise and just ruler, regarded Rosamond and Sir Hugh with a thoughtful expression. He had heard their story, he had read the evidence they had presented, and he had summoned Sir Reginald to testify. He was determined to get to the truth, to uncover the web of deceit and betrayal that had been woven around Sir Hugh. Sir Hugh Fitzalan, the king said, his voice booming through the hall, you stand accused of treachery, of using unfair means to win the tournament at Lord Ashton's castle. What say you? Sir Hugh stepped forward, his head held high, his gaze unwavering. I am innocent, your majesty, he said, his voice clear and strong. I did not cheat. I won fairly, and I have witnesses to prove it. Lord Ashton scoffed, his eyes flashing with anger. Witnesses? He sneered. Paid liars, no doubt. Men in your employ. The king silenced him with a raised hand. Sir Reginald of Blackwood, he called. Step forward. Sir Reginald, looking pale and nervous, approached the king. He was sworn in, his hand placed on the Holy Bible, and he was asked to recount the events of the tournament. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze darting between Lord Ashton and Sir Hugh. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. He told the truth, confessing that Lord Ashton had bribed him to lose the joust, to make it appear as though Sir Hugh had cheated. The hall erupted in murmurs, the nobles whispering amongst themselves, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and disbelief. Lord Ashton, his face turning pale, tried to interrupt, to deny the accusation, but the king silenced him again. Sir Giles, the king called, summoning Lord Ashton's advisor. You were present at these discussions. Is Sir Reginald's testimony true? Sir Giles, realizing that he had been exposed, that his loyalty to Lord Ashton would not save him, confessed his involvement in the plot. He confirmed that Lord Ashton had orchestrated the entire scheme, that he had bribed Sir Reginald and fabricated the evidence against Sir Hugh. Lord Ashton, his face contorted with rage and despair, could no longer deny the truth. He had been exposed, his treachery revealed for all to see. The king, his expression grave, pronounced his judgment. Lord Ashton was stripped of his titles, his lands, and his possessions. He was banished from the kingdom, his name forever stained with dishonor. Sir Hugh, his name cleared, his honor restored, was commended for his bravery and his integrity. The king praised Rosamund for her courage and her resourcefulness, for her unwavering loyalty to her husband. As they left the great hall, Rosamund and Sir Hugh were greeted with cheers and applause. They had faced adversity, betrayal, and danger, but they had emerged victorious, their love strengthened, their bond unbreakable. That moment was precious, a reminder that goodness and courage can win. That evening, as they sat together in their chambers, Sir Hugh took Rosamund's hand, his eyes filled with a love that was both profound and enduring. You saved me, Rosamund, he said, his voice husky with emotion. You believed in me when no one else did. You fought for me when I had lost all hope. And you, Hugh, she replied, her voice filled with love. You gave me something to fight for. You showed me what it means to truly love, to truly trust. He leaned in, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was a testament to their journey, their scars laid bare, their love triumphant. The scars of the past still lingered, but they were no longer a source of pain, of shame, of separation. They were a reminder of their resilience, their courage, their unwavering commitment to each other. They were a symbol of their love, a love that had been tested, tried, and proven true. Chapter 18. The Gathering Storm. With Lord Ashton's treachery exposed and Sir Hugh's honor restored, Rosamund and her husband returned to Fitzallen Keep, welcomed as heroes by the castle inhabitants. The shadow of suspicion and fear that had hung over the keep was lifted, replaced by a sense of relief and renewed loyalty. Even Lady Isolde, her animosity finally dissipated, offered Rosamund a tentative gesture of acceptance, acknowledging her courage and her unwavering devotion to Sir Hugh. However, their peace was short-lived. News arrived from the borders of the kingdom that a rebellion was brewing, led by a disgruntled nobleman, Lord Morion, who had gathered a force of mercenaries and disgruntled lords, threatening to overthrow King Edward and plunge the realm into civil war. Sir Hugh, as a loyal vassal of the king, was summoned to raise his forces and join the royal army. It was a call to duty, a test of his loyalty, and a threat to the newfound peace and happiness he had found with Rosamund. Rosamund, though fearful for her husband's safety, understood his obligation. She had seen his commitment to honor, his unwavering sense of duty, and she knew that he could not stand idly by while the kingdom was threatened. "You must go, Hugh," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You must defend the realm. You must uphold your oath." He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of love and regret. I do not want to leave you, Rosamund, he said. "Not now, not when we have finally found each other." "And I do not want you to go," she replied, her tears flowing freely. "But I know you must. And I will be here waiting for you, praying for you, keeping Fitzallen safe." They spent their last few days together preparing for his departure. Rosamund oversaw the provisioning of his troops, ensuring that they were well equipped and well fed. She helped him don his armor, her fingers tracing the familiar contours of the steel, her heart aching with the knowledge that it might not be enough to protect him. On the morning of his departure, they stood together in the courtyard, the assembled troops waiting, their banners bearing the Fitzallen falcon fluttering in the breeze. Sir Hugh took Rosamund's hands, his gaze searching hers. "Promise me you will be careful, Rosamund," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Promise me you will stay safe. Promise me you will wait for me." "I promise, Hugh," she replied, her voice choked with tears. I will be here. I will always wait for you." He leaned in, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both passionate and desperate, a farewell that spoke of love, of fear, of hope. Then, he mounted his warhorse, his face set with determination, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. As he rode away, leading his troops towards the gathering storm, Rosamund stood on the castle walls, watching until he was out of sight, her heart filled with a mixture of pride and dread. She knew that the coming months would be filled with uncertainty, with danger, with the constant fear of loss. But she also knew that she had to be strong, for him, for Fitzalan, for the future they had vowed to share. The love that had blossomed would be tested again, she felt it. She would manage the keep. She would protect its people. She would pray for his safe return. She would be the Lady of Fitzalan, in every sense of the word. And she would wait. She would wait for the day when he would ride back through the gates, his armor gleaming in the sunlight, his eyes filled with the love that had sustained them both through the darkest of times. She held on to that thought. She clung to hope, and she prepared to face the coming darkness alone. Chapter 19. The Battle for Fitzalan. The weeks that followed Sir Hugh's departure were filled with a gnawing anxiety for Rosamund. News from the war was scarce and unreliable, rumors spreading like wildfire through the castle and the surrounding villages. Some spoke of great victories for the king's forces, others of devastating defeats. Rosamund clung to the hope that Sir Hugh was safe, that he was fighting bravely, that he would return to her. She threw herself into the running of Fitzalan Keep, managing the estate, overseeing the defenses, and ensuring the well-being of its inhabitants. She proved to be a capable and compassionate leader, earning the respect and loyalty of even the most skeptical retainers. Lady Isolde, her initial animosity completely gone, became a valuable ally, offering her experience and her support. One evening, as Rosamund was working late in her solar, reviewing accounts and planning for the coming harvest, a messenger arrived, bearing a sealed letter. Her heart pounded as she recognized the seal. It was from Sir Hugh. She tore open the letter, her hands trembling, her eyes scanning the words. He was alive. He was well. He had fought in several battles, distinguishing himself with his courage and his leadership. But the war was far from over. Lord Morian's forces were proving to be stronger than anticipated, and the king's army was facing a difficult and protracted campaign. At the end of the letter, Sir Hugh wrote, "I miss you, Rosamund, more than words can say. You are my strength, my inspiration, my hope. I fight for you, for Fitzalan, for the future we will share. Wait for me, my love. I will return." Rosamund clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. His words were a balm to her soul, a reassurance that he was still alive, that he still loved her, that he was fighting to come home. But her relief was short-lived. A few days later, a scout arrived at the castle gates, his face grim, his clothes stained with blood. He brought dire news. A detachment of Lord Morian's forces, led by a ruthless knight known as Sir Cian, was heading towards Fitzalan Keep. They were seeking to plunder the castle, to seize its resources, and to punish Sir Hugh for his loyalty to the king. Rosamund knew that she had to act quickly. Fitzalan Keep was not as heavily fortified as some of the larger castles in the kingdom, and its garrison was depleted, with most of the able-bodied men fighting alongside Sir Hugh. She had a small force of loyal retainers, some aging knights, and a handful of young squires. It would not be enough to withstand a prolonged siege. She called a council of war, gathering her remaining knights and advisors. She laid out the situation, her voice calm and determined, despite the fear that gnawed at her. "We cannot hope to defeat Sir Cian's forces in open battle," she said. "But we can make it difficult for them. We can delay them. We can make them pay a heavy price for every inch of ground they take." She outlined her plan. They would strengthen the castle defenses, fortify the gates, and prepare for a siege. They would also send messengers to neighboring lords, loyal to the king, pleading for assistance. The inhabitants of Fitzalan Keep, inspired by Rosamund's courage and determination, rallied to her side. They worked tirelessly day and night, strengthening the walls, sharpening weapons, and preparing for the coming attack. As the enemy approached, Rosamund stood on the castle walls, her heart pounding, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She saw the banners of Lord Morian's forces, a sea of black and red, advancing towards Fitzalan like a gathering storm. She knew that the battle for Fitzalan was about to begin. It was a battle she might not win, but she would fight. She would fight for her home, for her people, for her husband. She would fight for the future they had dreamed of, for the love that had sustained them through the darkest of times. She was ready as she would ever be, to face the enemy. Chapter 20. A Dawn of Forgiveness. The siege of Fitzalan Keep was a brutal and relentless affair. Sir Cian's forces, far outnumbering the defenders, attacked the castle walls with siege engines, battering rams, and scaling ladders. Rosamund, directing the defense from the battlements, inspired her men with her courage and her unwavering determination. She moved among them, offering words of encouragement, tending to the wounded, and even taking up arms herself when the fighting grew fierce. Lady Isolde, fighting alongside Rosamund, proved to be a skilled and fearless warrior, her initial resentment towards Rosamund completely forgotten in the face of a common enemy. They fought back to back, their shared determination a beacon of hope amidst the chaos and carnage. The defenders, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity born of desperation and loyalty. They repelled wave after wave of attackers, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. But their numbers were dwindling, their supplies running low, and their strength failing. On the third day of the siege, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked battlefield, Sir Cian launched a final, desperate assault. His men breached the outer walls, pouring into the courtyard, overwhelming the remaining defenders. Rosamund, seeing that the battle was lost, ordered her men to fall back to the inner keep, the last line of defense. She knew that they could not hold out for much longer, but she was determined to make the enemy pay a heavy price for their victory. As she stood on the steps of the keep, her sword raised, her face defiant, she saw Sir Cian approaching, his armor stained with blood, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "It is over, Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice harsh. "Surrender, and I will spare your lives." Rosamund looked at him, her heart filled with a mixture of defiance and despair. She knew that surrender was the only option, but the thought of submitting to this ruthless enemy, of seeing Fitzalan fall into his hands, filled her with a bitter rage. Suddenly, a horn blew in the distance, a clear, resonant sound that cut through the din of battle. It was a sound Rosamund recognized, a sound that filled her with a surge of hope. It was the horn of Fitzalan. From the crest of the hill overlooking the castle, a force of knights appeared, their banners bearing the silver falcon on a field of azure. It was Sir Hugh. He had returned. He had received Rosamund's message, and he had ridden day and night, gathering reinforcements from loyal lords to come to the aid of Fitzalan. He charged down the hill, his men following close behind, their swords flashing in the setting sun. The tide of the battle turned. Sir Cian's forces, caught between the defenders of the keep and Sir Hugh's relieving army, were routed. The fighting was fierce, but brief. Sir Cian, seeing that he was defeated, attempted to flee, but Sir Hugh intercepted him, his sword striking true, ending the threat to Fitzalan forever. As the battle ended, Rosamund ran to meet Sir Hugh, her heart overflowing with joy and relief. They embraced, their tears mingling with the sweat and blood of battle, their love a beacon of hope amidst the devastation. In the aftermath of the siege, Fitzalan Keep was a scene of both sorrow and celebration. Many brave men had fallen, their lives sacrificed in defense of their home. But the castle had been saved, the enemy defeated, and the future secured. As the sun rose, casting a golden glow on the battered walls of Fitzalan, Rosamund and Sir Hugh stood together, their hands clasped, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They had faced the storm, they had endured the battle, and they had emerged victorious. They mourned for the lives lost, gave thanks. Lady Isolde approached them, and for the first time, there was only respect and peace in her gaze. She took Rosamund's hand, and for the first time, called her sister. The dawn brought with it the promise of healing, of rebuilding, of a future together, a future forged in the crucible of war, tempered by loss and strengthened by love. The battle had been won, not just for the castle, but for forgiveness, for unity, and for the enduring power of love and loyalty. A new day had begun, and it was theirs. Epilogue. The years that followed the siege of Fitzalan Keep were a time of peace and prosperity. Sir Hugh, his reputation enhanced by his bravery and his loyalty, became a trusted advisor to King Edward, playing a key role in maintaining the stability of the realm. Rosamund, revered as the courageous Lady of Fitzalan, devoted herself to the well-being of her people, overseeing the rebuilding of the castle and the surrounding villages, fostering a sense of community and shared purpose. Fitzalan Keep, once a place of shadows and unspoken grief, became a haven of warmth and laughter. The scars of the past remained, etched into the stones of the castle walls, woven into the tapestries that adorned its chambers, but they were no longer a source of pain, but a reminder of resilience, of courage, of the enduring power of love. Rosamund and Sir Hugh had children, a son and a daughter, who grew up strong and proud, inheriting their parents' love of the land, their commitment to justice, and their unwavering loyalty to each other. The children were a symbol of the future, a testament to the enduring legacy of Fitzalan. Lady Isolde, her heart softened by time and by Rosamund's unwavering kindness, became a beloved member of the family, a wise and trusted counselor, a surrogate mother to Rosamund's children. The animosity of the past was replaced by a deep and abiding friendship, a bond forged in the crucible of shared adversity. One autumn evening, many years after the siege, Rosamund and Sir Hugh stood together on the castle walls, watching the sun set over the rolling hills, the landscape bathed in a golden light. They were older now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces lined with the passage of time, but their love for each other remained as strong and as true as it had been on the day they had first confessed their feelings. Sir Hugh took Rosamund's hand, his fingers tracing the familiar lines of her palm. "We have come a long way, Rosamund," he said, his voice filled with a quiet contentment. She nodded, her eyes meeting his, her heart overflowing with love.
"We have, Hugh," she replied.
"And we have done it together." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was a testament to their enduring love, a love that had weathered the storms of life, a love that had triumphed over adversity, a love that had bound them together forever. The kiss was a promise, a culmination, a celebration of everything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rosamund and Sir Hugh stood hand in hand, their silhouettes outlined against the fading light, two figures who had found love, peace, and purpose in a world of chaos and uncertainty. Their journey had been long and arduous, filled with challenges and triumphs, with loss and renewal, but it had led them to this moment, to this place of quiet contentment, of enduring love, of a future secured by their courage, their loyalty, and their unwavering belief in each other. The scars of their battles, both in turn,